Hey folks, welcome back to the WP-Tonic Show, episode 232. I've got the great pleasure of having two guests on the show this Wednesday. Kim won't be joining us, folks. She's still trying to sort out her slightly wrecked home in Florida. So, but she will be returning this Friday on our roundtable show. Now, back to our two great guests. That's Ron Huber, and I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly, folks, and Tom McCracken, founders of IntelligenceWP and the digital agency LevelTen. I'm going to ask you to introduce yourself quickly to the listeners, and let's start with Ron. A quick introduction, Ron?
So I'm the CEO of LevelTen. I've been a agency owner for 15 years, mainly in the Drupal space. And this year in 2017, I'm breaking into the WordPress world and very excited about everything that's going on.
That's great. And Tom, like to quickly introduce yourself?
Actually, a little bit of a similar background to Ron's, but I'm more on the development side. So started LevelTen back in 1999. And I do, Ron does a lot of the business stuff, so it allows me to do a lot of the programming. And so it's kind of what we're doing.
Right. That's great, folks. So tell us a bit about IntelligenceWP. What's it about and why you developed it and what you hope to achieve with it?
Okay. The main reason is that I think Ron mentioned that we did WordPress a long time ago, and then we got into Drupal as we started to work with some large enterprises. And we had some big teams that were doing a lot of different things. Marketing automation, generating lots of content, ebooks, all of these, just bunches of things going on. And over time, people started to try to figure out, well, what of this content is actually really working? We know we're doing all these things, but we need to figure out what really is, what's the right way to write titles? What's the right proper length? And not just what shows up better in the search engines and what might generate more traffic, but what really engages people and gets people to convert. Sort of what is the ROI of all these different elements of things that we're doing from marketing channels and so forth. And so we basically created a system to help solve that problem. Originally, the thinking was that we would have to build a custom analytics package or something like that. But as we dug deeper into what was possible with Google Analytics, there was a lot of extended features of Google Analytics. And by leveraging those extended features, we were able to kind of get to a better set of analytics than just sort of the vanity metrics that you typically see in Google Analytics. Yeah,
because like what we've discussed, Tom, is a lot of people set up Google Analytics and it's forgotten, isn't it? It's the lost orphan of digital measurement, isn't it?
Yes. Google Analytics is built for everyone. Right? They have to make sure the platform works for every type of business, cross-platform, and where we can be a little bit more specific. We can really dig down into content providers and people that are in business to do action over the web, and in this particular case, all the way drill down into what folks that use WordPress and how they can get the most out of their analytics.
And what's really impressed me is that it's the basic core product is free and it's not crippled, really, is it? It's totally pretty functional. With how much of the functionality is available in the free product?
Yeah, and I think part of it is analytics has just always been a passion of mine. And years ago, we built a free hit counter. And what I really wanted to do is I wanted to give people a complete product that they could see the true ROI of what they were doing. And so then we kind of left the pro version for people who are doing more advanced things, need to do advanced visitor tracking and so forth. But yeah, I wanted to give people the complete tools so they basically could create the sort of method for measuring ROI and understanding the value of their content marketing channels without having to pay for, without having to put that barrier of going up to that next level.
So, but obviously there are paid options, but folks, like I say, if you go to their website, there'll be full links in the show notes, a full transcription of our interview. I've had a look at it, and Tom's going to spend a little bit of time, and I'm going to actually run it on the WP-Tonic website as well, and we'll be reporting back how I find, how effective I find it. But it looks a really fantastic product. I've been looking for something that can really help, because I'm as guilty as probably we all are that listening to this show of, we get very enthusiastic about Google Analytics for a week and then we forget it. And I do have some other plugins that are going to deactivate that give some basic info. But to get the real power, you need to spend a little bit more time. So you, the next product version of the product is that you offer to set it up and give some training. Isn't that correct?
Yeah, especially in the beginning now. And to be honest with everybody, the product has been around only for a few months. We've had it on the Drupal side for a few years, so it's a very solid platform. But we've just moved it over to be available as a plugin on WordPress. So as we're getting people to use it and getting amazing groups like WP-Tonic to really give us feedback. What we want to do is see how you use it, what parts of it are important to you. So for us to come along and do the install for you and then offer you a few months free of the pro version, all we're asking for is a little feedback. At the core of it, we're open source guys. We've been, part of the Drupal community for many years. We were major contributors of that, and we plan to be major contributors of the WordPress world. It's at the core of it, it's all open source.
Greatly said. So what are some of the key things that you think IntelligenceWP offers that could attract the listeners and get their attention and hopefully sign up to download the product and start using it?
I think the thing pretty much out of the box that most people gravitate towards if they're doing content marketing or inbound marketing or something like that is the content scoring. And in particular, where I think it's really interesting is if you've got different people who are writing content, and it can give them feedback to, hey, not just, hey, these are the best practices for writing a good title, or this is the best subject to write about. It can actually give them feedback on what happens, not just traffic. Are people sharing it? Are people, commenting? Are they engaging with it? And are people, is it converting? Are people downloading ebooks or signing up for newsletters? And so they can actually see the business impact. And what's been fun about that is then we start to see teams gamify around that. And now, because a lot of times we go in and help teams, they might be engineers, they might be non-marketers, and they don't necessarily, they're just writing because it's something they're passionate about. Now they can actually see that kind of data, and they can start to run experiments. Start setting up what kind of tone should we use on our blog post, or different lengths and things like that, and start to see what is the impact of those different things, not just traffic, but actual engagement and conversion. That's, I think, one of the biggest things. Another area that's kind of fun is web developers. I like to say that web development is kind of done by edu-guessing, a lot of theory. And so, a lot of times we want to change a menu structure on the website, or we want to, change the design. Well, now we have a way of measuring the true impact of doing that. So if someone just spent $100,000 redesigning their website, we can now tell what kind of change did we, what are we going to, we've measured this for a month now. What kind of ROI can we project out, and was that a successful positive ROI generating, or should we maybe go back and change a few things back? And then I think the last, one of the other big things is marketing channels. Understanding what kind of ads are producing the most engagement and conversion, understanding which keywords, social networks, all of those things, breaking all those things down. And then the last thing is be breaking everything down by visitors. So, location, devices, one of the big interesting pieces of information we've gotten is that while we're all doing responsive design's been around since 2010, 2011, we're all doing it now. But even though your website might collapse down into mobile and look right, a lot of times the performance is very different from a conversion standpoint. So a lot of times that CTA may get buried and no one even looks at it. And so if you can identify, hey, we're seeing a real drop-off in the way our blog posts are structured on mobile devices, maybe it's not, and the site technically is mobile, but maybe there's something being lost. There's something being lost because of the way we're organizing some of our content. Maybe there's some things that we can do to fix it and measure, do they really fix the issue?
That's greatly put. I actually attended a WordPress conference in Sacramento a couple of weeks ago, a WordCamp, and there was a great presentation. Unfortunately, just forgotten the individual's name, but he's actually coming on the shows. I apologize, but he's the chief analytical strategist for 10up, which is a leading WordPress agency. And he did a great presentation about why people find Google Analytics hard to use. And one of the things he pointed out is a lot of the way Google Analytics is set up initially, out the box, can actually give you a lot of false data, false figures about visitors. Is that right, Tom?
That is correct. Well, in particular, it's going to give you some false data around time on page, bounce rates, things like that. And then particularly some of the ways some of the mobile devices work gets trickier. So for example, if you leave a page open, so let's say you go to a recipe website, you just open a bunch of recipes, you click right tab and open those pages, Google Analytics counts all of those as page hits. Whether or not the page ever was visible or not, it might have just been a hidden tab. And so that's one way it creates sort of some false data. Another way is that some of the mobile browsers will actually refresh pages automatically when you go back to them, and Google Analytics will track those as a new visit, or even if it happens, say a few hours later, a new session. When in reality, it's not a new session. And in particular, you can pollute a lot of your mobile data. And so, yeah, there are some things that cause, and there's lots of other little things that can kind of sort of create sort of some false data in this, or some misleading data in the system.
Yeah, because he was saying that it basically gives you inflated figures about visitors, how many people are coming to the site, which he hinted that Google want you to feel more visitors coming than there probably is to some extent. But I don't know if that's over-exaggerating it, but he did kind of show. And I think the other thing I just wanted to see if you agreed with that was pointed out as I was listening to this presentation, is he kind of emphasized that you need to be clear about the objectives that you're going to measure. That's the tricky bit, isn't it? Because each organization might have different priorities, might they? That's why having something that out the box is practically impossible, because it could be an e-commerce store, it could be various types of organization, couldn't it? Right.
And that's one of the big challenges Google Analytics has, is going through that.
And that's why a lot of people fail at it, isn't it?
Yeah. And we've created a wizard to help people install and walk you through, and we've got some things set up that you can easily change, because it is a complex setup. There's a lot of decisions that you have to make that you might not be ready to make, and that's where I think most people get hung up, is especially when you get to custom events and et cetera. Maybe, Tom, you can elaborate on that.
Sure. And yeah, you're absolutely right. Every website's different, but that's what's kind of the nice advantage of being an agency, is that you do see a lot of things that are common. Most people are going to want to track social shares. They're going to want to track when people play videos, when people vote on something, or they do a poll, or form submissions are going to be a big thing to do. And so by creating tools that makes it easy to track those things, you cover a lot of things. Now, what those form submissions are can be very different. And that's one of the hopes, is that there's a lot of work we've done with clients about how to kind of organize those things. So, for example, if you're doing marketing automation, you might want to group all your educational pieces into a single conversion. And you may want to group your middle of funnel offers and your sales leads, and then maybe your job applications and these things. And there's some tricks to kind of bring a lot of that together. And so that's some of the tool helps make that stuff easy, but we also want to be providing education that kind of point people in the right direction.
Oh, it's very well put, Tom. So how long has you've been operating the plugin in the Drupal world, and how many roughly users have been using it in the Drupal world?
We released it in 2013. And we primarily, unfortunately, it's one of those things where it got released and then I got kind of pulled into other work. And so
never happened to me.
Promoted as well as I would have liked. And we primarily use it as a tool for clients we worked with. Right. The interesting thing for us was that what we found is that, in the Drupal world, what we all kind of do is there's these sort of top agencies and we all get together and we're friends and we talk. But really what we do is we try to prove that we know this platform better than other people, and that's how we get hired. But what's interesting is we came up with, we were doing some pitches to some large clients. And what we found was these kinds of tools helped us land the business, and kind of took out of the equation which team is sort of the best team or something like that. They're going, oh, we want that kind of measurement on our website. And that's where the idea came from. Well, let's try to start working with other agencies to use these tools. And when we started to do that, we started to get a lot of requests to bring it over into WordPress. And so that was sort of the impetus to bring it over. And so there's a few hundred people that are using it in the Drupal world. And we've put on some websites that are, we've put it on some $1 billion up websites of some of the clients that we work with. And so it's kind of nice to get some of that kind of experience.
Well, that's great. I think we're going to go for our break. It's been when we come back, we're going to delve into what's it like to run a Drupal-based agency. What's some of the tips? Yes, this is Facebook. This is the WordPress. I'm mixing my words here, folks. I'm not being on the Scotch at all. I promise you, it's too early, even for me. But one of the things I wanted to discuss is bring people in from different communities and see some of the differences, and just hear their reflections. And I think it's going to be a fascinating discussion when we come back. So we'll be back in a minute, folks. We're coming back, folks. I promise not to mix my words. I got a bit stuck at the before we went for our break. You've been running your agency for quite a while. So have you always been big into Drupal, guys? Or how long have you been part of the Drupal world?
Actually, no. So interestingly, I kind of had a weird background. Actually, when I first started, we did Java and Smalltalk, and we mostly did online banking, things like that. And then, which was awesome till 2001. And the telecoms fell apart and all that kind of stuff. And so we really started getting more into doing small websites that wanted marketing. A lot of times they were static websites with just some nice SEO and so forth. But then as content started becoming more important, we were using WordPress. And back then what we do is we would kind of join together different open source platforms. So if we needed a forum, we'd use PHP. If we needed e-commerce, we'd use OS Commerce. And so we ended up having this project for Simon & Schuster where we had, as a book they were releasing, and we had to do this game, the sweepstakes, and we had a WordPress blog for the author, and we had forums, and we just realized this is starting to get tough to integrate all this stuff together. And we were using, we did a lot of cool stuff with WordPress. Like we did Roger Staubach's blog. We had our own blog running on it. We built a plugin called Blog Matrix, and to test designers, we'd have them come in and build a free WordPress theme to see how well they did with it and release the theme back. But this is like the WordPress, two for time frame. And so what ended up happening was, we actually, being an old object-oriented programmer, I thought it would be a good idea to build our own CMS, so it's object oriented, because we couldn't really find one in the PHP world that was had an object oriented framework. Well, after several iterations, we eventually found our way to Drupal. Primarily, we were doing a big music platform, and Drupal had been already used on Sony and Universal and a lot of the big music companies, and so we started building with it. And we moved our whole company, over to it. And I think we actually still did for a few clients. We did a few WordPress sites along the way, but we got very into the community. And actually, Ron actually owns another agency in San Diego. He was, when we were first learning Drupal, he was one of the agencies that we called and said, hey, could you guys help us out? And he goes, we're so busy. Let me give you the name of four other agencies. And over the time, I've gotten to know a lot of the other people in the Drupal world. And Ron and I we've been talking about, where the web was going and how everything's becoming more ROI driven. And we said, hey, let's go launch this product together. And a lot of it had to do with, I have a lot of friends in Dallas. I have a lot of friends who are marketers and, work in the WordPress world. So I've always kind of kept up with it. But finally, it's sort of like we had too many people ask us to move it. And I'm like, I'll go dust off my chops. It's all PHP, and after a few weeks, I'm like, we can do this.
All right. So you got into Drupal. So what is there any particular industry that you specialize in, or do you just is more to do with budget and size? And
as Dries, the founder of Drupal, has said, Drupal is a great platform for ambitious web goals. And if you don't really know what you want to build, but you want to build something amazing, Drupal is a great building block to do that. Right? If you know what your business is and you know what it should be, WordPress is a much better platform for that, because there are already plugins and tested and true ideas. But on the custom side, if you're trying to push the edge, so that really opens up to entertainment. A lot of entertainment groups work in that. My team in San Diego just launched the Recording Academy, the Grammys. We do a lot of work with healthcare, because healthcare is very regulated. There's a lot of industries that make a lot of sense, that need the flexibility and the core of what a Drupal will provide. But then all the rest is WordPress, right?
Well, kind of. I got experience in a slightly different. Before I got heavily involved in WordPress, and when I was based in the UK and a little bit here, I was involved with the Expression Engine community, which kind of the way with those larger websites kind of was a direct competitor to Drupal. You tended to have agencies that either used Expression Engine or Drupal.
Especially in Europe.
Pardon?
Especially in Europe.
Yes, it was big in the UK. Had some big names that were really quite. So, what are some of your main competitors when you're bidding? Apart from other Drupal shops, is it priority kind of systems that are you're bidding against or fighting against?
Yeah, I think it depends. On one side, if it's going to be a more marketing focused site, Sitecore and Adobe will be the two big ones. In particular, Sitecore is always a tricky one for when people have got a .NET background and you've got an IT manager that's not ready to have open source come in and so forth. On the development side, a lot of times it's custom development. It's going to be Ruby on Rails, Symfony, Laravel, different systems like that. And more recently, Node, even seen a little bit of Go, those kinds of things. So those tend to be the main competitors for Drupal.
Right. So what how do you pitch, the strengths of Drupal to this potential client?
Well, for one thing, there is no upfront licensing fee. That's, WordPress has the same. The flexibility and basically, the work that we've done, over the last 11 years or so that, our agencies have done a lot of work in the Drupal and been able to leverage that when it comes to the challenges that a company is trying to accomplish. And if you're trying to build from let's say you got a SharePoint because you have an intranet, or you have, Salesforce, you want to have a big integration, Drupal is a very good platform for integration, and it has it covered, extensively when you're talking about companies that use a CRM for those kinds of sales.
But what are some of their concerns, on the other side, what are some of their concerns about when you say, you're a Drupal shop? What are some of the things that come up that you have to overcome?
I think security is always a big issue for everybody these days. The other side of it is that Drupal is built for developers, not for marketers. There's a lot of custom work that has to be built in. That's where LevelTen for years has been ahead of the curve and building products like Open Enterprise that have bridged the gap between WordPress and Drupal very well, especially for content marketers.
Oh, yeah, because you got this other product in your library, haven't you? Do you want to quickly talk about that?
Sure. Well, the vision way back when was that we wanted to build websites that actually got results. And realize there's a lot of tools that you're going to need to do that. You're going to need to create content. You're going to need to have good conversion mechanisms. You're going to need call to actions. You're going to have good analytics. You got to have a lot of SEO tools and social promotion tools, a lot of things that extend the CMS, and then you're going to need to bring them all together. So that's what really is at the heart of what Open Enterprise is. And what's interesting is a few years ago, we started looking at HubSpot and realized, we're actually kind of building almost like an open source HubSpot in some ways. It's different because it's built really to be much more flexible, but there is a lot of overlap, sort of bringing all those things together. And then really the other part of it is just one of the tricky things about Drupal is, it's just a rector set. You just dump a bunch of blocks on the ground, but a lot of times there's things that are not as polished up. You got to build every time for a client. So a lot of that stuff that some of the big companies needed, like very responsive style guides. You can build a responsive theme, but you need a good style guide and make sure you've got all these pretty elements that all collapse properly and so forth. And so we integrated a lot of those things that as we worked with clients, we found that they found useful, but people weren't necessarily going to pay for on a one-off basis.
Right. So what's because, the great strength of the WordPress community is, and also its weakness, is its third-party plugin ecosystem, and the entrepreneurs and businesses that have been built up. There's some great talent in the WordPress community that built very successful businesses. What's it like in the Drupal world, guys?
That's almost a podcast to itself.
Everything is custom not custom, but it's module building. There's 15,000 modules now. You have to be an expert at all of it. I recently in the last year, I had a client come to me and asking for an editorial calendar. We quoted it out. It was somewhere around $75,000. I went on to WordPress, and I think it was $199 plugin that covered almost double what we were going to do because somebody had, as an entrepreneur, gone out and did that. And that's such a powerful community. In the WordPress, in the Drupal world, nobody wants to pay for a plugin or a module. They want to build it themselves, or they want it to be open, completely open source. Where in the WordPress world, there is a market that allows people to succeed. And frankly, this is what drew me to the market was you need investment into these products. You need to continue to develop and support. So you need somebody to pay for those. And you can't do that as a free module. The amount of free work we do in the Drupal world to maintain the amazing work that has been done is frankly, it's ludicrous. But in the WordPress world, we're able to monetize it and at least support the product.
You just said it from the two very experienced digital agency owner there, folks. The world of Drupal has got its own problems. I think we're going to finish up for the podcast part of the show. We're going to continue this great conversation on YouTube, and you'll be able to see it on the WP-Tonic website, with links and a full set of show notes and a transcript of the conversation, folks. So we'll probably go on for another 10, 15 minutes, which you'll be able, like I say. But before we end, how can people get hold of both of you and learn more about Intelligent WP and basically what you're both up to?
So there's, of course, the LevelTen website, which is getlevelten.com. And then the intelligence is IntelligenceWP.com. And that's the best way to get a hold of us.
Oh, that's great. Just to finish up, folks, in October and also the beginning of November, we're already booked with guests. We've got some fantastic guests coming on the show from outside the world of WordPress, and also key members of the WordPress community. I'm really excited about. I just had a confirmed guest for November that I'm really excited about. We'll be back on Friday for the Roundtable show, which is always really very popular with the audience. And if you want to support the show, please go, I know I almost say it almost every episode, but please go to iTunes and give us a review. It really helps. And just contact us in general. Basically, I've had a lot more people in the WordPress community contact me. If you're organising a WordCamp, we're most welcome for you to join us on the round table. We're having one of the organisers of the Seattle WordCamp join us this Friday to talk about the WordCamp in Seattle and a couple other things. And if you want to join us, please outreach and contact us. So we'll see you next week for another episode, an interview, a business owner, somebody outside the community, or a WordPress junkie. That's what we will be interviewing. We'll see you next week, folks. Bye. So bonus content. So have you actually had to go against when you've been bidding, or the clients interviewing a short list? Have you been up against a WordPress agency like 10 Up at all?
We've never gone up against 10 Up, but I would say that most marketing agencies, full service marketing agencies, will push WordPress first until the client says, I want to do something different. And then they'll go to the Drupal side. And I think that's pretty much across the country.
Right. Yeah, I can see that. But it's really interesting that you still go against this from IT departments. That is open source. So straight away, they come up with this fantasy about security, isn't it? Because then I feel it's probably even more secure because it is open source, isn't it?
The Drupal world has a great security team. There's a lot of support behind it. When something comes up, we solve it in hours, not months. I really believe that it's much more secure. You have thousands of people trying to squash a bug instead of a security team that maybe that's fifth on the list. So security is not an issue, but it's one that they love to bring up.
It's also... So would you say that a lot of your competition is actually they're going to build something in Ruby and Rails or one of the JS libraries? Is that some on your upper clients? You're up against pure custom development.
I think most of our competition is against folks trying to push a technology they don't understand. The ad agencies do have a tendency to feel comfortable with certain technologies or certain developers, and they'll just throw in the idea of this is what we think the platform should be, without really understanding the full concept of the project.
Do you think there's over the past 18 months, there's been more pushback about price and about development times and that?
We have a great little network of agencies that we every quarter connect to each other, and I've heard recently there's a great deal of pressure, downward pressure on hourly rates. We're hearing that over and over again. I think that frankly, the international world is catching up a little bit. Definitely Eastern Europe is has more developers that are able to provide something, and then I think a lot of firms, especially the bigger firms, have offices in India, and they're able to get their developers to produce a lot for them, even though we still argue whether that's cost effective or not. It's something they're paying for, so they have to invest in that time.
Yeah, I understand where you're coming from, because I think it's a real balance, because it can actually cause projects to, I was going to make a sweeping statement, and I kind of stopped myself, because a sweeping statement is a sweeping statement, isn't it? And when you make those, you got to really support it with facts, and I can't, so I cut myself there a little bit. Thank God for that. But that's something I sense as well. There's more pressure. What about speed of development? Is that another factor? They also expect projects to be done a lot quicker.
Yeah, a lot of projects, especially on the bigger side, the enterprise level, I think project management, project coordination is a good 75% of any project. If you really understand the project and and you're an executor, you can, from start to finish. The development side is probably not the thing that slows you down. It's probably more about clients being able to relate their needs and the entire project. We see more and more today, projects are started without full designs, without full technical specs. Mm-hmm. They just want to jump in, and they have a deadline of December 1st, but we'll get you the information along the way.
All right. What do you think's driving that? It's really interesting you say that's happening more often. Have you got any insights why that is?
I think for one thing that the people on the client side are more experienced, right? This is not their first or second website. They've been building websites for as long as we have. So they know they can get us this information, and they can adapt. I also think that they've saw that internally the budgets are there. They're just not being released. So the timelines don't change, but the projects just never get started on time, and it's simply too late.
Right. That's really fascinating. I was going to ask you why you think that is, but have you got any insight into that at all?
It's something that we're very much trying to figure out right now. Is there seems to be it was a pretty slow summer across the board for the people we know, and that's just a small segment. Most people were pretty slow, but we also had a lot of clients taking 3-week vacations this summer. Personally, our agencies, the 2 agencies that we run, are picking up, and the end of the year is looking very strong. But it's also looking, everything has to be completed by the end of the year. So let's just get started.
And what's your general feeling about WordPress and where it's going as a content management system? What's your people are looking slightly from the outside in, really, not totally part of the WordPress bubble.
It's interesting. So there's two sides. There's the developer side of me, and there's the marketing side of me, or the business side. The business marketing side of me loves WordPress. In fact, marketing is sort of a redheaded stepchild in the Drupal world. Everything's about tech. The tech side, there's some things like, there's just APIs that you just got, and you don't have to worry about building them. I'm seeing people building the same things over and over again. But I think, there's a lot of similarities between the two communities. And actually, I think obviously WordPress is very, very popular, but there's this need for websites to be more than just websites, to be a collection of tools that make a business impact. And I think actually WordPress is positioned, and it's already happening, but I think it's kind of ideally positioned to make that happen. It's almost kind of interesting that you look at these two sort of communities that there's a lot of overlap, but there's differences. And if they borrowed some ideas from each other, they both would be much more effective platforms.
I don't know if this is happening in the Drupal world, but with WordPress, I sense that it's been pulled in many directions at the same time. You got like companies like 10up. Jake, you can send me the check later on. Actually, I've mentioned your company 4 times there, and you don't sponsor the show. But seriously, you got companies like that want WordPress to go a certain direction, and then Matt of Automatic, their direct competition are hosted solutions like Squarespace, Wix, and some of the development. Is there a bit of that in Drupal, or is it? I suppose because Drupal is really aimed at the large project. Really, that's where its strength lies. Is it? So it's not so pushed in so many directions, or am I deluding myself?
So, yeah, it's kind of interesting. The one difference I do think between the two communities is that Drupal's very collaborative. There's a ton of bike shedding and a ton of discussions on where things are going. But even with all of that happening, when we went to Drupal 8, there's a lot of very ambitious things that we wanted to do. We brought Symfony in and stuff like that. But the one thing that sort of ended up happening, but it was almost a bit of a community, or it wasn't like one person driving it. It was, teams of people driving it, is that we went, very enterprisey in our patterns. And that sort of alienated, I think, a decent number of people that, hey, they still want to support the small startup or universities or things like that. And so we have had that happen, but it's interesting because from what I understand, from what I've heard from different people, your podcast being one of them, is that, that's a decision that's sort of being made by one person, where I think in the Drupal world, it was sort of a decision we made together. And when you get a whole bunch of tech people together, they want to build some really sophisticated software.
Well, kind of, you probably got a slightly biased when Tom joined us for one of our round table shows, folks, and hopefully you'll be both Ron and Tom will be joining us in the coming months periodically, because it's great to get people from slightly outside the WordPress bubble, but part of the open source community. It gives a slightly different frame of view, really. You probably got a slightly distorted view there because Matt, I don't think Matt is a kind of doesn't listen to, Matt Manahan here, folks, doesn't listen to key leaders of the WordPress community. I think it's more that he wanted to push this particular upgrade and project, the editor, and he felt that without his personal control and pushing it, it was going to not happen in the time frame which he felt was necessary. But on the other hand, he's a man that wears many hats, and there's only so many hours in a day, no matter how dynamic you are. So I think that was the main point I was trying to make in that discussion, Tom, is that with the best, and I think it showed, because I think some of the problems, and I don't know it's happened in the Drupal world, was that there was a bit of a lack of communication about exactly what was happening, and that caused a little bit of upset, which has been clarified to a certain extent, but I also feel it was part of the many hat syndrome. Has that also been part of the Drupal world, or it seems like you was hinting that there was more general discussion, really?
Yeah, I would say that does not happen in the Drupal world. There, it is a groupthink in the Drupal world, so we're not surprised by what is happening. But on the same hand, it's nice when somebody says, "Here, this is where we need to go." And I think that what the direction that WordPress is going to be very helpful in the future. There has to be some underlying technology to build on. And we've been going to WordCamps for the last 8-9 months. We have 3 coming up in the next month and a half, and so we have been staying out of the argument. By the way, we've done that for 10 years.
Very, very wise.
Yeah. But it's now getting out, and I think as more people understand what the value and where it will go. I think you'll find that it will be just a great upgrade for WordPress in the future.
Oh, that's great. I think we're going to end now because both our guests are extremely busy people. But can you quickly tell how people can find more about you, Ron and Tom, and more about your company?
Yeah, well, so you can definitely go to our website at getlevelten.com. or our plugin website, which is IntelligenceWP.com. But Tom and I will also be at the San Antonio WordCamp this weekend. Next month in Austin, I think it's the 20th of October, is the Austin WordCamp. And then Tom is speaking at the DFW WordCamp in November. I believe that's the 10th and 11th of November. So we're getting out there. Our goal is to be part of this community as we are as part of the Drupal community. So we're looking forward to meeting a lot of people and getting a feedback.
That sounds great. Fantastic. Right, folks, we're going to finish off, like I say, join us for the WP-Tonic Roundtable on Friday. We're going to have another great guest next Wednesday, and we'll see you either on Friday or next week, folks. Bye.
Thanks, Jonathan.